$300 million? My father left me $300 million, but to claim it, I had to marry the one man who destroyed my family, a man I hated, a man I didn't trust, a man who knew exactly how desperate I was. And the worst part? If I walked away, the people I loved would pay the price. Serafina Sarah Hayes was a woman who had chosen a life of purpose over privilege. She had walked away from her father's fortune years ago, choosing to work as a social worker, dedicating her life to a small, underfunded charity. Her father, the eccentric and wildly successful financier, had always respected her choice, even if he didn't understand it. When the summons came to the reading of his will, Sarah expected a small, sentimental bequest, perhaps a favorite painting or a trust fund for her charity. She certainly didn't expect to be ushered into the mahogany-paneled office of the city's most prestigious law firm, where the air was thick with the scent of old money and new greed. The lawyer, a stern man named Mr. Abernathy, cleared his throat. To my beloved daughter, Serafina, I leave the entirety of my estate, my properties, and my controlling shares in Hayes Global, a fortune estimated at $300 million. Sarah's breath caught. $300 million. It was enough to fund her charity for a century. However, Mr. Abernathy continued, his voice dropping to a theatrical hush, this inheritance is contingent upon one condition, as stipulated in Clause 7, subsection B. Sarah leaned forward, her heart pounding with a sudden cold dread. You must marry Mr. Julian Vance and remain married to him for a period of no less than 1 calendar year. The name hit her like a physical blow. Julian Vance. He was sitting in the corner of the room, a silent, predatory shadow she hadn't even noticed. He was the corporate lawyer who had orchestrated the brutal public divorce of her mother, leaving her emotionally and financially devastated. He was the man who had later handled the legal maneuvers that crushed her father's closest rival, earning him the nickname, the Viper. Julian Vance was the man who had ruined her life. This is insane, Sarah whispered, pushing back from the table. I won't do it. I don't care about the money. Julian finally spoke, his voice a low, smooth challenge. That's a lie, Miss Hayes. You don't care about the money for yourself, but you care about the charity you run, the one that is currently 3 months behind on its rent and facing a massive lawsuit from a disgruntled former employee. Sarah froze. How did he know that? Your father, Julian explained, a cruel smirk playing on his lips, was a meticulous man. He knew your weakness, and he knew mine. He then revealed the second part of the condition. I, Julian Vance, am the co-beneficiary. If we successfully complete the marriage, I receive the other half of the fortune, $150 million. The truth was a bitter pill. Her father had used her love for her charity as leverage, forcing her into a marriage with the man she hated, all to secure a massive payout for both of them. Sarah looked at Julian, seeing only the cold, calculating greed in his eyes. She had no choice. For the sake of the children and families her charity served, she had to sign the contract. The wedding was a quick, cold affair, a signature on a document, a flash of a camera, and a diamond ring that felt like a handcuff. They moved into the massive, empty family estate, a monument to her father's wealth that now felt like a prison. Julian immediately laid down the rules, his voice as precise as a legal brief. Separate rooms, separate lives. We maintain the facade in public, but in private, we are strangers. There will be no intimacy, no emotional attachment. This is a business transaction, Serafina, nothing more. Sarah agreed, her hatred a shield against his cold dominance. But living with Julian was a constant, high-tension performance. She found herself watching him, trying to find the monster beneath the tailored suit. She noticed the cracks in his facade. He was meticulous, yes, but he also left a single, perfectly brewed cup of tea outside her door every morning. He was ruthless, but she once overheard him on a late-night call, quietly funding a legal aid clinic in a poor neighborhood. He was a contradiction, and it began to chip away at her certainty. The first major test of their facade came at a high society charity ball. Sarah, dressed in a stunning gown, was cornered by a rival lawyer, Marcus Thorne, a man known for his vicious attacks on Julian. "Poor Seraphina," Marcus sneered, his eyes darting around the room. "Married to the Viper. I hear the marriage is as cold as his heart. Tell me, is it true he sleeps in a separate wing?" Sarah's blood ran cold. She knew Marcus was trying to expose them. If the marriage was proven to be a sham, the will would be voided, and her charity would be ruined. Before she could speak, a strong, possessive hand wrapped around her waist. Julian was suddenly there, his body pressed against hers, his presence radiating a dangerous, protective heat. "My wife was just telling me," Julian said, his voice a low, intimate growl that sent shivers down Sarah's spine, "that she finds my heart perfectly warm, especially when we're alone. Isn't that right, darling?" He leaned down, his lips brushing her ear, and whispered, "Play the part, or lose everything." Then he did the unthinkable. He kissed her. It wasn't a gentle, romantic kiss. It was a demanding, possessive claim, a public declaration of ownership that left the entire room stunned. Sarah, shocked by the sudden, raw passion, found herself responding, her hands gripping his lapels. When he finally pulled away, Marcus Thorne was gone, his face pale with defeat. "That," Julian said, his eyes dark and intense, "was for the audience. Don't let it happen again." But the damage was done. The kiss had shattered their carefully constructed boundaries, leaving a volatile, undeniable spark of attraction in its wake. The incident at the ball changed everything. The hatred was still there, but it was now mixed with a terrifying, undeniable desire. Sarah, desperate to regain control, threw herself into her investigation. She needed to prove Julian was the monster she knew him to be. She began to look into the tragedy Julian had caused 5 years ago, the car crash that had killed a young woman and ruined a family. She found the old newspaper clippings, the police reports, and the legal filings. Julian had represented the driver who was acquitted, using a loophole that devastated the victim's family. Sarah confronted him in the library, the scene of their earlier tense encounter. "I found it," she said, her voice trembling. "The car crash, the acquittal. You knew he was guilty, Julian. You used your legal brilliance to set a killer free. You ruined that family. That's the real reason I hate you." Julian didn't deny it. He simply looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You think I'm a monster, Seraphina? You have no idea." He then revealed a piece of his past. "The man I defended was the son of the boss, the head of a powerful crime syndicate. They had my sister. They threatened to destroy my family if I didn't get their son acquitted. I had a choice, ruin one family or lose my own sister forever." Sarah was stunned. "You sacrificed your soul to save your sister?" "I sacrificed my reputation," Julian corrected, his voice hollow. "And I earned the loyalty of a very dangerous man, a man your father was indebted to." Julian then revealed the true, terrifying secret. Sarah's father hadn't just been a financier. He had accidentally laundered money for the same syndicate. When he realized his mistake, he tried to pull out, but the boss demanded a massive repayment. "Your father couldn't pay," Julian explained. "He came to me. The man he knew was already compromised by the boss. He knew the boss couldn't touch the fortune if it was split between 2 married parties. The will wasn't about inheritance, Sarah. It was about protection. He forced you to marry me to create a legal wall around the assets, protecting you from the boss." The truth was a devastating blow. Her father hadn't been a cruel manipulator. He had been a desperate man making a terrible choice. And Julian, the man she hated, had sacrificed his own moral standing to save her. The hatred between them evaporated, replaced by a desperate shared alliance. They were no longer enemies. but co-conspirators against a greater threat. The one-year deadline was only a month away. The syndicate, realizing their money was locked behind the legal fortress of the marriage, made their move. Sarah's brother, the one person she had protected above all else, was kidnapped. The note was simple. Sign over your half of the inheritance, or your brother dies. Sarah was hysterical, ready to sign everything. But Julian stopped her. This is what your father feared, Julian said, his face grim. If you sign, they get the money, and they still kill your brother to send a message. We fight them, Sarah, together. Julian confessed the full truth. He had been tracking the syndicate for years, using his legal connections to gather evidence. He had been waiting for the one-year mark, when the money would be legally hers, to make his move. They worked together, a perfect, terrifying team. Julian's legal mind and cold logic, combined with Sarah's social worker connections and deep knowledge of the city's underbelly, led them to the syndicate's hideout. The confrontation was tense. The boss, a cold, calculating woman, sat across from them, her eyes gleaming with malice. "The papers, Mrs. Vance," the boss demanded. "Sign them, and your brother walks free." Julian stepped forward, placing his hand on Sarah's shoulder. "She won't sign, but I will offer you a deal. I know where your money is hidden. I can give you the location of every shell company, every offshore account. In exchange, you release my wife's brother, and you leave us alone forever." He was offering himself as collateral, willing to face the syndicate's wrath to protect Sarah. Sarah, seeing the true measure of the man she had married, made her move. She didn't sign the papers. Instead, she pulled out a small, encrypted flash drive. "I don't need to sign anything," Sarah said, her voice ringing with newfound authority. "My father's will had a final secret clause. The entire fortune is now legally mine, and I'm using it to expose you." She had spent the last month working with Julian's legal aid clinic, compiling a massive dossier on the syndicate. She had already sent the encrypted file to every major news outlet and law enforcement agency in the country. "You can kill us," Sarah challenged, "but the truth is already out. By the time you walk out of this room, your empire will be crumbling. The choice is yours. Run now, or face the full force of the law." The boss, realizing she had been outmaneuvered by the kind-hearted social worker, snarled in defeat. She released Sarah's brother and vanished into the night. The one-year mark passed quietly. The contract was fulfilled. The syndicate was dismantled, and the Hayes fortune was safe. Julian, his reputation restored, packed a small bag. He had fulfilled his duty. "I'm leaving," he said, standing in the foyer. "The contract is over. You have the money, and you have your freedom." Sarah walked toward him, her heart aching with a love she had fought for a year to deny. "The contract is over," she agreed, "but the debt is not." She reached out and took his hand, the diamond ring now feeling like a promise. "You sacrificed your life and your reputation to save me, Julian. You are the only man who has ever truly protected me." Julian looked at her, his cold eyes finally melting with a genuine raw emotion. "I fell in love with you, Sarah. I fell in love with the woman who saw the monster and still chose to fight for the man." Sarah smiled, tears welling in her eyes. "I fell in love with the man who was willing to be the monster for me." She then revealed the final, beautiful twist of her father's will. "My father's will had one last clause, Julian. The marriage only had to last 1 year, but the final transfer of the entire fortune, all 300 million, was contingent on our decision to stay together, proving the love was genuine." Julian was stunned. He wanted us to choose each other, not the money. "He wanted us to rebuild," Sarah whispered. "He knew we were the only two people who could understand the wreckage of our past and build something beautiful from it. They chose to stay, not for the money, but for each other." The forced marriage had become a genuine, hard-won love, a testament to the fact that sometimes the greatest love stories are born from the darkest betrayals.